So I've been seeing a lot of new players try to pick up strumming lately, and an issue a lot of them struggle with is learning how to, say, like improve speed and improve stamina. Well, I actually think a lot of them probably have some untapped speed and stamina that they just don't know how to channel quite yet because they haven't entirely learned how to control the strum bar in a way that allows them to exercise their potential, the things that they probably could do if they just knew the proper method for doing so or were more used to and accustomed to the strum bar. So usually when you're starting out strumming, your first thought is to use your arm, like to go up and down like this. But that's pretty inefficient because you're using this length of the body, like this whole area, to control what's all up here. And, that can be pretty clunky because, this is where the action is. You want to be using your hand. Like, you don't want to be trying to delegate all of that to this area. There's just way too much distance between which muscles are being used and for what purpose, when you could just be using the area most close to the strum bar. If you're going to be using your arm, chances are that's for really fast strumming, and more specifically, you're probably going to be doing it for vibrate strumming. At least if you're like solely using your arm. Top players tend to kind of switch between like which things they do, whether it's their arm, their wrist, or their fingers. But then the second method we use, which is quickly become the main method of most top strumming players, is to use your wrist. Now, Venna can explain this much better than I can. I don't really understand my own biology very well, but the science isn't too hard to pick up on. You use this, you just do that, stuff like this, and what you end up doing is, it seems simple, but obviously a lot of you are still trying to figure that out. But that's really good for fast strumming sections because you can control the way you hold the bar and the way your hand moves up and down it, the way it tries to make those inputs up and down. But again, I actually have a harder time doing that for slower section songs. So if I'm doing something like the Holy Mountain Rewind, this works. But I find it a little bit harder to control because when I do this, I want to go a lot faster because, your wrist enables you to go much faster like that. So if I'm doing a slower song, I feel like my wrist is telling me to do something that I shouldn't be doing. And as such, it makes it hard for me to maintain rhythm. So instead, I took something from Randy. Now, Randy, on slow section songs, he likes to use just his finger, his index and his thumb. And he will literally, in this very exaggerated motion, if you go watch him play, you'll see him do this. We'll do this. He just bounces his thumb and his index finger off the strum bar in an alternative fashion. And the reason he does this is because it's really good at teaching you rhythm, especially on more off-tempo and off-beat songs. So if you're doing this with your arm, right? It's easier to maintain an even pace, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. But if you start doing something like this, it's a little bit harder to maintain. But if you're using just your fingers, you have a little bit more wiggle room there because it's all right here. Your grip is now perfectly intertwined with your technique. And because of that, it enables you to have a better sense of control over the things you do. And so what you want to do, if you're doing something like Rewind or the Holy Mountain, is don't even worry about your wrist for the most part, unless you get really tired and you need to. Instead, take your index finger and your thumb and just do this. Or even better, something I like to do is I just kind of keep my index finger up and then just bounce my thumb off of it. This is really good for 2 round burst things, really quick succession of that's really fun to do. That technique is very utilitarian. It is very good for all kinds of different charts. I use this for songs as difficult as Three-Legged Workhorse. Because it's really easy to do this and maneuver your hand up and down the strum bar. It easily readjust your grip because you're constantly moving your thumb and index finger up and down. So you can kind of change it very easily because of that. So this is what I recommend to newer players. Like, try using just your thumb and your index finger. See how far that can take you. And when you do that, it will hopefully teach you the proper muscle memory for things like, let's say, if you're playing like miasma, it'll help you learn, you know, like bursts of 4 notes much better than like this, because you can kind of lose the rhythm when you're sort of indiscriminately strumming up and down. If you're doing this and then you move to this, you get much more used to that rhythm, that pacing than otherwise. Now, there are some drawbacks to this technique. Okay, so number one, of course, is that the higher notes per second you get, the less relevant it tends to become. It sort of loses efficiency because, you know, the motion, that exaggerated motion like this, becomes harder to do in faster paces. At that point, you're going to be wanting to use your wrist in order to cut the animation of your fingers out of the question. Like, you don't have to worry about that at that point. You know, like, I can't do this like that. I can only do that so fast, you know. So the second drawback here is that it's going to put a lot of pressure on your fingers that might not otherwise be the case with your wrist. This is going to happen in all kinds of strumming, but specifically if you're doing this, then it can, like, you know, put excess force on the pressure point of your thumb, specifically your thumb. Your index finger will feel it too, but if you're doing like I do, where I just kind of like bounce my thumb off, you know, like, the thumb kind of becomes the centrifugal force in my strumming technique there, and therefore it will take a lot of the brunt of the pressure. So it might cause your fingers to get numb, and oftentimes that can make it going back into a strumming song after you've like exhausted your fingers a little more awkward and uncomfortable. So, you know, do pace yourself, do take this slowly, don't just rush into it. Know your limits, know your body, try to keep up with it, take some water, you know, keep yourself healthy. But the main reason I make this video is because I think I don't really hear people talk about this type of method, even though it's something that's carried me for a very long time, and helped me become a lot better at just, you know, more uneven songs in terms of their tempo and chartings. And I think some of the newer players aren't quite aware that they can just do that. So hopefully that helps you. Everybody's different. It might not work for you necessarily, but if it does, then consider this video a success. Tell your friends, you know, just let them know that, you know, this, you can do this. Like, don't be afraid to take your hand off the strum bar. If you can move it all the way up here to tap, you can just do this. It's that simple. Try it out, see if it works. If it does, woo, success.